The old fellowship hall in Shreveport, Louisiana wasn't meant to hold history, but that night it did. Rows of folding chairs scraped softly across the polished floor as neighbors gathered, expecting politics. What they got instead was a moment that none of them would ever forget. At the heart of it all, a quiet 8-year-old girl named Lily. Small, shy, and clutching a Bible that once belonged to her grandmother. When she stood up and asked Donald Trump a question about God, the room fell silent. What followed wasn't politics. It was something deeper, something real. And before the night was over, even the former president was left shaken. But what exactly did she ask? And what did Trump say that moved a room full of strangers to tears? Before we begin, if you believe stories like this one matter, consider subscribing to our channel. We're on a mission to bring inspiring moments to light, and your support makes that possible. The setting was humble. Wood panel walls, a few framed verses of scripture, and rows of metal chairs filled with people. Parents, retirees, students, the curious, and the skeptical. This wasn't a Trump rally. There were no chants or signs, just quiet expectation. Donald Trump stood at the front of the hall, not behind a grand podium, but a simple one borrowed from Sunday sermons. His trademark red tie was there, his familiar presence unmistakable. But something was different. His tone, his posture, as if he, too, felt that tonight would be about more than politics. And it was. Among the crowd sat Lily, her legs barely reaching the floor, her Sunday dress neatly pressed. She didn't speak. She didn't fidget. She just held tightly to her grandmother's Bible, the edges frayed, the gold lettering faded. Her mother sat beside her, whispering, "You can ask him, but only if you're ready." Lily had nodded. She had been practicing the question for weeks. But when will be the right time? As Trump began to speak, the room stayed polite but distant. He talked about policy, the economy, the future. A few claps here and there. But the spark wasn't there. Not yet. Lily waited. Her fingers tightened around her Bible with each passing moment. Her question wasn't for applause. It wasn't for show. It was a question born from grief. From a little girl missing her grandmother and wondering where God fits into all of that. Finally, the floor opened for questions. Adults stepped up first, concerns about roads, jobs, education. Even a compliment about Trump's tie. Lily watched, her body shrinking into the seat, unsure if she could really do it. But then her mother gave a slight nudge. And that was all it took. Lily stood. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she moved forward. And that's when something changed in the room. People noticed, not because she was small, but because there was something in the way she held herself. Something steady, even as her hands shook. By the time she reached the front, the hall had grown almost completely silent. Trump looked down, saw her. His face, known for its confident edges, softened for just a moment. "And what's your question, young lady?" he asked gently. Lily gripped her Bible until her knuckles turned white. Her voice wavered, but it didn't break. "Mr. Trump, what does God mean to you?" The room stopped, not just quiet but breathless. People looked to Trump, then back to Lily. The weight of the question pressed down like a thick fog. It wasn't just unexpected. It was disarming. For a man known for his fast answers and sharp comebacks, Trump didn't speak right away. He looked at her, then at the Bible in her hands. And something shifted. If this moment is already reaching your heart, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to see how far this message travels. Trump stood still, leaning slightly against the podium. The room waited. A minute passed, maybe two. It felt like forever. Finally, he spoke. "That's a big question," he said quietly. "And it's not one I've always had the answer to." Gasps rippled quietly through the crowd. Trump, the man known for certainty, had just admitted doubt. And yet, it didn't weaken him. It made him human. He glanced again at Lily, then at the crowd. "When I was about your age," he continued, "my parents took me to church every Sunday. I remember staring up at the stained glass windows, wondering if God was really listening." He paused. His hand tapped gently on the wooden podium. "My father used to say, faith is like a ladder. You climb it one step at a time. Even when it feels like you'll fall, you keep climbing because there's something up there worth reaching." A small chuckle rippled across the room. But Lily didn't laugh. Her eyes stayed locked on him, still waiting, still hoping. Trump's voice softened again. But life isn't always kind, he said. And as I got older, I faced moments that made me question everything. I've been angry at God. I've doubted him. I've wondered if he gave up on me. The room leaned in closer. No one was thinking about politics anymore. This was something deeper. This was about pain and purpose. And the moment a little girl gave a former president the space to be honest, Lily didn't flinch. She stood there, tiny and still, as Trump's words settled into the room like a warm weight. Her grip on the Bible loosened just slightly, her eyes glistening beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. And in that moment, it wasn't a politician standing in front of her. It was a man, flawed, bruised, and searching, just like everyone else in the room. Trump took a breath, his voice growing firmer. "But I'll tell you something," he said. "Even in my worst moments, when I thought I was completely alone, I realized something. Faith isn't about always knowing. It's about trusting. Trusting that even when everything's falling apart, something bigger is holding it all together." He turned to Lily, locking eyes with the young girl. "And God, to me," he continued, "is that reminder that no matter how far I fall, I can get back up. That I'm not done. That I still have work to do." The hall remained hushed. People weren't just listening. They were feeling. Something had shifted. This wasn't just a town hall anymore. It had become a sacred space. That's what happened. A single tear rolled down Lily's cheek. She didn't cry loudly. Her shoulders didn't shake. It was quiet, gentle, but deeply, unmistakably real. Her small hand went back to her Bible, clutching it tighter as her mother leaned over, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart." But Lily shook her head slowly. She wasn't sad. She was moved. Trump noticed. His expression, normally so guarded, softened even further. He stepped slightly away from the podium and crouched just enough to bring himself closer to her level. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Lily," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," he said with a faint smile. "You know, Lily, sometimes the simplest questions are the most important. And sometimes they're the ones we're most afraid to answer." She nodded, her voice trembling. "My grandma used to say that too. She said God is always listening, even when we don't hear him." The former president paused, clearly taken aback, not by the statement, but by the truth of it. His gaze shifted back to the crowd. "You know," he said, "this little girl just asked something that most adults are too afraid to even say out loud. What does God mean to us? Not as a slogan, not as a ceremony, but as a truth." Silence again. No one shuffled in their seats. No one coughed. It was as if the air had been pulled still by something greater than any of them. Trump stood straighter now. "We're always looking for answers out there," he said, pointing gently toward the exit. "In power, in success, in control. But faith forces us to look in here." He pressed a hand lightly to his chest. "And that's where the real work begins." The crowd slowly began to nod. Some wiped tears. Others simply stared, lost in their own thoughts. Then Trump turned back to Lily once more. "Thank you for reminding me, Lily," he said. "You're wiser than most people I've met. And tonight, I think you reminded all of us why faith still matters." Soft applause echoed through the room, not loud or rowdy, but reverent. Lily didn't clap. She just stood a little taller. Her tears had stopped. In their place was something stronger, pride. As the clapping faded, a man from the back of the room stood slowly. His face was lined with years of labor. The kind of man who'd lived more life than he talked about. With a deep breath, he raised his hand. "Mr. Trump," he said, voice steady but raw. "I've spent most of my life trying to figure out my own faith. Hearing you talk about anger and doubt and hope makes me wonder if maybe all of us have just been too afraid to admit we're struggling. Do you think that's part of the problem?" Trump turned to him and didn't hesitate. "I do," he said. "We've gotten really good at pretending we've got it all together, at acting strong, at staying silent. But the truth is, faith isn't easy. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't always give you answers, but it gives you a reason to keep going." The man slowly nodded and returned to his seat. Others murmured quietly in agreement. Heads turned, glances shared. And then Lily spoke again. She didn't ask a question this time. She gave a truth. My grandma used to say, faith is like planting seeds. You don't always see them grow right away, but you have to believe they will. The room froze again. Trump let out a quiet breath and smiled. She sounds like a very wise woman, he said. And she's right. Faith isn't about seeing the tree grow. It's about trusting that the seed is alive. If this moment resonates with you, take a second to subscribe to our channel. We share stories like this to remind people everywhere that hope still lives, and your support helps spread that light. The crowd was no longer just spectators. They were participants now, part of something sacred, something deeply shared. People began exchanging glances not of political alignment, but of mutual reflection. The divisions that had walked in the room with them had started to fall away. Then, slowly, another hand rose. An elderly woman, her silver hair neatly pinned back, stood with visible effort. I lost my husband last year, she said. Her voice shook, and I've been angry at God ever since. I don't know how to get my faith back. Do you think it's too late? Trump stepped closer to the edge of the stage. His eyes met hers, sincere and steady. No, he said simply. It's never too late. Faith doesn't walk away from us. It waits. And sometimes, when we're at our lowest, that's when it finally reaches us again. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. All around the room, people were crying now, quietly, openly, and no one was ashamed. The story wasn't about politics anymore. It was about something far more universal. Loss, hope, belief, and the courage it takes to keep asking the questions. The air inside the fellowship hall felt changed. Not lighter, not heavier, just different. A shared quiet had settled across the crowd. It wasn't the hush of formality. It was the stillness that comes when people are holding something fragile, sacred. Donald Trump, still standing near the edge of the stage, looked out over the audience, not as a performer scanning a crowd, but as a man searching for connection. I've learned something over the years, he said slowly, his voice calm. Faith doesn't always show up in the big moments. It doesn't always appear when the cameras are rolling or when we think we've earned it. He turned and looked again at Lily. Sometimes, he continued, faith arrives in the quietest questions, from the smallest voices, and when we least expect it, it breaks us open in a way nothing else can. Lily smiled faintly, her cheeks still pink, the corners of her lips lifting just enough to show the quiet pride blooming inside her. Her mother placed a gentle arm around her shoulder, whispering something no one else could hear. Lily nodded. Her grip on the Bible was no longer tight with fear. It was tender now, like she was holding a friend. Trump faced the crowd once more. We live in a world, he said, that teaches us to hide what hurts, to mask our doubts, to pretend we've got all the answers. But tonight, a little girl reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Real strength starts with being honest, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Scattered murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. People weren't thinking about party lines or cable news takes. They were thinking about their own quiet questions, the ones they hadn't dared to ask aloud. Trump let the moment breathe. Then his tone shifted again, softer. When I was younger, I thought I had life figured out. I was ambitious, driven. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, fought hard enough, I could control the world around me. He paused, as if seeing a younger version of himself in his mind. But life has a way of teaching you otherwise. The room grew still again. There was one moment in particular, he continued, a moment that changed everything for me. People leaned in. They could feel it coming, the real story, the one behind the public image. It was about my brother, Fred. Trump's voice lowered. The words slowed. Fred was different from me. He had this light inside him, a quiet kindness. He wasn't interested in business or in winning. He cared about people. He wanted to help. He looked out into the crowd, but it was clear his eyes were seeing something else, something far away. But Fred, he struggled. He had demons. And no matter how much my family and I tried to help him, it wasn't enough. Trump's hand gripped the podium, fingers flexing against the edge. When he passed away, I was angry, he said. Angry at him, angry at myself, and angry at God. Lily's expression grew somber. The weight of the story rested on her small shoulders, as if she somehow understood every word. I couldn't make sense of it, Trump went on. Why would someone so good be taken away? Why would God allow that? He took a breath. I stopped praying for a while. I stopped listening. I thought maybe faith was a fairy tale, something we told ourselves to feel better when life got hard. The crowd listened in complete silence. Some bowed their heads. Others closed their eyes. But then one night, Trump said, something happened. I don't know if it was a dream or just a memory, but I saw Fred's face in my mind, clear as day. And he was smiling. That big, goofy smile he always had. And I heard him say something I'll never forget. Don't be angry, Don. You've got work to do. The room held its breath. Trump looked straight ahead. That's when I understood. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about moving forward even when you don't. It's about believing that our pain isn't the end of the story. He turned back to Lily, whose eyes shimmered with tears again, though this time they didn't fall. And when you ask me what God means to me, Trump said gently, this is what I want you to know. He's the reason I keep going. He's the reminder that there's something more than just success or failure, that there's purpose even in pain. A gentle sound moved through the room. It wasn't clapping. It was something quieter. People whispering to each other. People exhaling. The kind of release that only comes when a wound has been named and acknowledged. Trump looked down for a moment, collecting himself. Then he raised his head again. We are all climbing a ladder, he said. Some of us are higher. Some are just stepping on. Some feel like we're about to fall off. But no matter where we are, we climb. Because there's something at the top worth reaching. He pointed once more to the old Bible in Lily's arms. And sometimes, all it takes to remind us why we climb is a question from someone brave enough to ask. If you felt something during this story, if it made you think about your own journey, we invite you to become part of ours. Subscribe to the channel and help us keep these moments alive for others who need them too. The room remained silent, but it was no longer heavy. It was full, and there was more to come. Because when truth opens a door, sometimes others finally feel safe enough to walk through it. The shift in the room was undeniable. What had begun as a standard town hall now felt like something more intimate, more human. People no longer sat as strangers. They were united by the simple courage of a question. A question asked by a child and answered with unexpected vulnerability. As Trump stepped back slightly from the podium, the silence gave way to quiet movement. A few audience members exchanged glances. A woman dabbed her eyes. A man exhaled slowly, his arms folded across his chest in thought. Then, slowly, a new voice rose from the crowd. A middle-aged man near the back, his hands rough, likely from years of labor, stood and raised his hand. The room quieted again. Mr. Trump, he said, what you said about pain and purpose, I think a lot of us here have been holding on to things we don't talk about. I've been carrying doubts for years. I've gone to church. I've prayed. But I've also walked away. Do you think God still hears us, even when we're silent? Trump's gaze locked with his, and he didn't rush his response. I do, he said simply. I think God hears us even when we don't say a word. Even when all we have are tears. Even when all we can offer is silence. Because he's not just listening to our words. He's listening to our hearts. The man nodded slowly. Others followed. Heads bowed. Hands clasped. But let me tell you something else, Trump added. We think we have to be perfect to be heard. We think God only listens when we're strong. But it's in the moments when we're weakest, when we're angry, broken, unsure, that his presence is strongest. Because that's when we're real. A woman seated in the third row clutched her husband's hand. He reached over and placed a hand on her knee. Across the hall, another figure stood. This time, it was an older woman. She wore a navy blue cardigan and a string of pearls that shimmered under the overhead lights. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I lost my husband last year, she said, barely above a whisper. 46 years we were married. After he passed, I didn't just lose him. I lost my faith. I couldn't understand why God would take him and leave me behind. I haven't stepped into a church since. Is it too late for me? Trump stepped forward again, his tone soft but clear. No, he said. It's never too late. Faith doesn't close the door on us. It waits. Quietly. Patiently. Sometimes for years. Sometimes for a lifetime. And when you're ready, really ready, it welcomes you back without asking why you left. The woman sat down, tears in her eyes. She wasn't alone. Around the room, people reached into purses and pockets for tissues, wiping away the tears that had crept silently onto their faces. Lily looked up at her mother, then over at the woman who had just spoken. For the first time since her question, she smiled. Not for herself, but for someone else. It was the kind of smile that said, I understand. Trump returned to the podium, gathering himself again. This isn't what I expected tonight, he said. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the things that matter most come when we don't expect them. Maybe God doesn't always answer us with miracles or signs. Sometimes he answers with a question, or a little girl holding a Bible. A few soft chuckles rippled across the room. Not laughter of amusement, laughter of recognition. We all carry something, he continued. Loss, regret, doubt. But that doesn't make us unworthy. That makes us human. And God didn't create us to be flawless. He created us to be faithful. Then Lily's small voice rang out once again, clear, steady, but tender. My grandma used to say, when you plant seeds, you don't see them grow right away. But if you trust and wait, they'll bloom when it's time. Trump smiled. Not the rehearsed, campaign trail smile, but something softer, sincere. Your grandma was a wise woman, he said. And she was right. Faith is a seed. Sometimes it lies dormant for years. But that doesn't mean it's not growing. That doesn't mean it's gone. He looked back at the room now, not as a leader giving a speech, but as one of them. A man reflecting on something he himself was still trying to understand. Some of us came here tonight looking for answers, he said. Some of us didn't even know we were looking. But this, what's happening right now, this is faith. It's messy, it's raw, it's honest, and it's powerful. He paused, letting the words settle deep. Then he added, and it started with the courage of one little girl. At that, applause rose once again. But this time, it wasn't for Trump. It was for Lily. People turned toward her, smiling, nodding, some even mouthing, thank you. Lily's face turned red, but she didn't hide. She stood proud. Not loud, but seen. Not famous, but felt. If this story is touching your heart the way it touched theirs, consider subscribing. It helps us share more of these powerful, human moments with the world. As the clapping faded, Trump spoke once more. We talk a lot about what divides us, he said. But tonight, faith, honesty, courage, they brought us together. And if a little girl like Lily can ask the question that breaks down all the walls between us, maybe we can start living like the answers matter. The room didn't cheer. It didn't roar. It just listened. Because everyone in it knew something rare had just happened. And none of them would leave quite the same. The room wasn't quiet out of obligation. It was quiet because it was full of thought, full of reflection, full of something no one could quite put into words, but everyone could feel. A sense that something important had just unfolded and that it still wasn't over. Trump rested his hands on the podium again. Not for show, not as a gesture, but because he too was feeling the weight of the moment. I've stood in front of a lot of crowds, he said. Big ones, loud ones, but I don't think I've ever felt anything like this. He looked directly at Lily. You reminded me tonight that there's still a place in this world for truth that comes without shouting, for questions that come from the heart, not from strategy, and that maybe the most powerful voices are the quiet ones. Lily looked down at the Bible in her arms and held it a little closer. Sometimes, Trump continued, we get so focused on winning arguments or proving a point, we forget that we're all just trying to make sense of the same questions. He turned his attention back to the audience. We've all been angry. We've all been afraid. We've all felt alone. That doesn't make us broken. That makes us human. And being human means we need something bigger than ourselves. He paused, scanning the faces before him. No one moved. No one interrupted. I don't pretend to have all the answers, he said. But I do know this. Faith doesn't erase pain. It gives it purpose. And that purpose, once you find it, changes everything. A few rows back, a young woman wiped her eyes. Beside her, an older man folded his arms across his chest, his jaw set not in frustration, but in thought. Trump's voice grew a bit stronger. There was a time, he said, when I thought power was what mattered most. Influence, success. But all of that fades. All of it can disappear in a moment. The one thing that stays is what you believe when everything else is gone. He let the room breathe again, giving space for those words to settle. Then he glanced back at Lily. Your grandma must have been an incredible woman, he said. She was, Lily replied, her voice soft but steady. She used to say, God isn't just watching. He's walking with you, even when you feel alone. Trump nodded slowly, visibly moved. She was right, he said. Even in the moments we think he's farthest away, that's often when he's closest. A hush lingered. You could almost hear the hearts beating. People weren't just listening, they were remembering. Moments when they, too, had asked the same question Lily had. Maybe in a hospital room, or at a funeral, or during a sleepless night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone out there cared. One by one, more people raised their hands. Not with demands or debates, but with stories. I lost my son 3 years ago, one woman whispered. I stopped praying that day. I haven't started again. My marriage ended after 20 years, another said. And I thought if God was real, he wouldn't have let it fall apart. I've made mistakes I don't think I can come back from, someone else added. I don't even know if God would want me anymore. Each confession was met with nods, with understanding, with eyes full of tears and hearts beginning to open. Trump didn't answer each one. He didn't need to. He simply listened. He let the room speak its truth. And when he finally did respond, his voice was low and firm. God isn't looking for perfect people, he said. He's looking for honest ones. For people willing to say, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm still here. That's enough. That's always been enough. He took a deep breath. We all carry guilt. We all carry loss. But God isn't waiting to punish us. He's waiting to restore us, to bring us back. And sometimes he uses the most unexpected people to start that journey. He looked back at Lily, like a little girl with a Bible and a question. A few soft claps began again. No one stood. No one needed to. The moment wasn't about volume. It was about depth. Trump straightened slightly. This world is loud, he said. It pulls us in every direction. It tells us we have to pick a side, shout the loudest when the fight. But tonight, faith reminded us of something different. He gestured across the room. It reminded us that we're all on the same ladder. Some are climbing. Some are slipping. Some are reaching out a hand to help the next person up. But no matter where we are, we're all on it. And then his voice dropped just a little more. So keep climbing. The hall was silent again. Not out of shock, out of reverence. If you've been holding on to something, grief, doubt, regret, maybe this is your moment to let a little light in, to start the climb again. If this story has helped you remember something you'd forgotten, share it with someone you care about. You never know who might need it right now. Lily looked around the room and saw what she had unknowingly set in motion. Healing. Not in the form of answers, but in the form of truth. Truth that says, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask. It's okay to search. Because the act of asking is sometimes the most faithful thing we can do. As the evening began to wind down, there was no official signal. No music cue. No closing announcement. But people felt it. Not an ending, but a settling. Like the final page of a story that would stay with you long after the book was closed. Trump looked around the room once more. His eyes didn't search for applause or approval. They searched for something deeper, recognition, understanding, and maybe even a little peace. He leaned into the microphone one last time. You know, he said, we talk a lot these days about what separates us. Politics, backgrounds, beliefs. But what we don't talk about enough is what connects us. And sometimes all it takes to find that connection is a single, brave question. He turned toward Lily. This little girl didn't just ask what God means to me, he said. She asked what God means to us all. And in answering her, I think a lot of us ended up answering for ourselves too. Lily stood quietly, her eyes wide, taking in every word, not as someone seeking attention, but as someone aware of the weight of the moment she had helped create. Trump stepped away from the podium and walked slowly toward her again. He bent down, so they were eye to eye. Thank you, Lily, he said, his voice low and sincere. You've got more courage than most adults I know. Don't ever lose that. She nodded, her small hand extending toward him. Without hesitation, he took it. "Thank you, Mr. Trump," she replied, her voice calm, steady. "For answering." The room stayed still, hearts collectively exhaling. It wasn't just Lily who had found something tonight. It was everyone. Pieces of themselves they hadn't touched in years. Questions they hadn't dared ask. Grace they didn't know was still available. Trump stood up, gave a final wave to the crowd, and walked slowly off the stage. But the room didn't empty immediately. People stayed. They turned to one another. They whispered. They hugged. Some just sat in silence, reflecting. Lily looked up at her mother. "Grandma would have been proud, wouldn't she?" she asked softly. Her mother smiled, eyes glistening. "She would have been more than proud," she said. "She would have been amazed." And as the crowd slowly filtered out into the Louisiana night, the lingering message wasn't one of politics, policy, or even performance. It was one of presence. That sometimes all it takes to change the direction of a room or a person's heart is a quiet question and the courage to ask it. The ladder of faith didn't look so far anymore. Because that night, in a humble church hall, people remembered they weren't climbing it alone. Lessons learned. That night taught everyone present, and maybe now you too, that faith doesn't need grand gestures. It grows in the quiet. It's found in the fragile. It waits for us through loss, through questions, through silence. And most of all, it reminds us that the simplest voices, when they speak from the heart, can move even the most powerful among us. If this story touched your heart, help us continue sharing stories that matter. Subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these messages reach those who need them most. And if you're ready to keep climbing, click the video on your screen now. It's a story that continues this journey of faith, of healing, and of the hope that waits for all of us.